But now we're up to Daf Samach Daled Amud Beis. Tanya Nami Hochi. I want to prove to you that the inheritance of a ger from his non-Jewish father who died is only D'Rabbanan. From a brisa. Bameh Dvarim Amurim. When do we say that we can accept this setup, this arrangement, that the idols of the father will be given over to his idolatrous son, and the ger in turn will inherit the monies, the cash? That's only when sheyarshu. That's only in the case of Yerusha, which the Gemara says is only the Rabbanon. The Rabbanon would make heal, and they allowed for this arrangement, even though the ger is benefiting from the idols. And he certainly is wrote to Bikumo so that he can make this swap and get the cash. Let's say there was a shutfis, a partnership, agreement between a non-Jewish brother and a Jewish brother meaning he became a ger, and now they break up the partnership and they sell the, whatever was in the joint account, including idols. And now the ger says, you know what? You, my brother, take the idols, and I'll take the cash. I'm sorry, not you, my brother. We're now talking about partners. You, my partner, I should say. So that's us. Why? Because now we're talking about shutfis. And if we're talking about shutfis, then the ger owns equal share in the idols. And now by giving him over to the non-Jewish partner, he's going to gain the cash. So he's getting cash for the idols. And that's an Isra Hano. But in any event, how could the Brisa differentiate between Yarshu or Nishtatfu? The answer is that Yarshu is only the Rabbanon. The Rabbanon would make il Shema Yachso L'Kulkul. Hadr Yosef Kamil, who the same Amoraim are still sitting and thinking about addressing different halachic issues. Ger Toshav Maushi Yivatal Avodas Kochav. This I find fascinating. A Ger Toshav who is committed to the mitzvahs of a Ben Noach, and one of them, of course, is Avodah Zara, so he's committed not to worship Avodah Zara. Now he wants to go ahead and be Mavatal Avodah Zara, but maybe the din of Bittul only applies to someone who is an idol worshiper. He can be Mavatal. A Jew can't be Mavatal Avodah Zara. Now, this non-Jew is a shtickle Jew. He's a little bit of a Jew. He's a Ger Tosha. The Polach Mavatel, maybe we should say that only another idol worshiper can be Mavatel. But the Lo Polach, Lo Mavatel, but this Ger Toshav, who is absolutely committed to get rid of every idol on the face of the earth, he can't be Mavatel. In that sense, he's like a Jew. Oh, Dilma, you say, no, Kol de Bar Mina Mavatel. Okay, we have to write down those words, Bar Mina. It's going to come up again and again. Bar Mina means he's still a guy. With all due respect, he may be committed not to worship our idols, but he's still a guy. He hasn't undergone gerus. He didn't have mila tefillah. And therefore, he still has the ability to nullify the idols through bittul because he's a guy. By Bar Minu. Rav Nachman, again, it's always Rav Nachman who comes up with the solution. Mistabra de polach mavatel lo polach lo mavatel. Rav Nachman is machmir. No. There's no bittul here. He who worships idols could be mavatal an idol. Somebody who's completely out of the realm of, he's not on the radio screen of Avodah Zara, he can't be mavatal Avodah Zara. Meisvei, how could you say such a thing? What about the Brisa? The Brisa says Yisrael shemotza avodas kocham b'shuk. A Jew found an idol. Could be a good thing. He wants to sell it and get a lot of money for it. The idol's made of gold, silver, I don't know what it's made of, are very expensive. If the idols have not come into his hands, then he tells the idol worshiper to be mevatel. But Misha Basel Yada, Eina Omer Lovas Kocham Vata, Umifnei Ma Omru, Ovi Kochavim, Vata Avos Kocham Shalov Shal Chavero, Bein Ovda Ubein She'ena Ovda. So one akum could be Mavatel, the Avodah Zarah of another akum, whether or not he worships it. So this last clause, whether or not he worships the idol, seems to indicate that even someone who doesn't worship the idol, like the case of the Ger Toshav that we discussed, he can be Mavatel over Kochov. It's against Rav Nachman. So Gemara says, "My ovdo, my ena ovdo." Ilema idivi idi ovde kochavim. If you're talking about two idol worshippers, is hainu shalo v'shal chavero. It says explicitly shalo and shal chavero. He could be mevatel his colleague, his idolatrous colleague, Avoda Zara, the idol. Elalav, in order to make it a separate clause and not just a repetition, is ovda ove kochavim. Meaning he's actually worshipping idols. Umisha ena ovda, that's already a ger toshav. Because otherwise, if you're not going to say it's a ger toshav, then it's going to be shalov v'shal chavera. But now it's not shalov v'shal chavera, it's ger toshav. And you prove from here, against Rav Nachman, that even someone who is no longer worshiping the idols, or maybe he never did worship the idols, he can be mevatel avodah zarah, because he's a guy. And the Gemara is assuming that who had in the same law applies to get toshav, he's still a guy. Lo, no proof. Both clauses in this Mishnah, in this Bryce, are referring to one akum being mevatel the avodah zarah of another akum. You rejected this. Why? Because hainu shalov v'shal chavero. I mean, what's the chiddush here? There must be some chiddush that one akum could be mevatel the idol of another akum above and beyond when it says hainu shalov v'shal chavero. And the Gemara answers the following: Reisha zev v'zel pa'ar. First, we have to know about two idol worshippers that have the same idol as their deity. And one could be mevatel the avodah zarah of the other because they're all committed to that particular religion. Or zev zel makolis. Seifa zelepar zelemakoles. The Sefer is telling me a Gavaldik Chiddush. There is no common deity to both of these goyim, these idol worshippers. One is committed to Pa'ar, the other is committed to Markolis. And the Chiddush is that even though they worship two different idols, nevertheless, the one that worships Markolis could be Mavatel, the idol of Pa'ar, and vice versa. B'kitzer, this brisa has nothing to do with Ger Toshav, so don't bring it as a possibility to support Rav Nachman, who's talking about Ger Toshav. Meisvei, we're going to bring another brisa to slug up Rav Nachman Ezu Ger Toshav. Well, here's a machlokes between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim. What is a ger toshav? According to Rabbi Meir, kol shekibul of v'nei shlosha chavim shelo lavad avodas kochavim. But it's not enough that he tells the wind that he is no longer worshiping avodah zarah. He's got to get three chaverim there, and they form a certain tribunal, and he has to formally declare in the presence of that tribunal, "I am finished with avodah zarah." He becomes a ger toshav. The Torah says, you have to sustain him and give him tzedakah. But Chachamim omrim kol shekibul of shev mitzvah shekibul b'nei Noah. Not enough just to say in front of a tribunal, I declare that I'm no longer worshiping avodah zarah. You have to declare in front of a bezdin that you are no longer like the other Nachrim, the other Bnei B'nai Noach, you are committed to all seven mitzvahs B'nai Noach. Now we have a third opinion. Acher moment. It's usually Rav Meir, but here it can't be Rav Meir. Elu lo bo l'chlal ger tosha. Neither a guy who disclaims Avoda Zara and commits himself to no longer, nor a guy, an idol worshiper who finally sees the light and he gets in front of a bezdin and he says, I commit myself to all Sheva mitzvahs b'nai Noach. None of these are a ger tosha. El ezu ger tosha, according to this third opinion, zeu ger ochel nevel shekibu level kaim kol mitzvah b'tor chutz mi'isur nevel. Wow. He accepts upon himself 612 mitzvahs. The only mitzvah he doesn't commit himself for is nevela, because the Torah says leger sherecha titnena. So the guy who's not yet misgayer, he's only a ger tosha, will eat the nevela, and that's fine. All right, now we get into a sugya of ger tosha. Miyachtim etzlo yayin, but ein mafkiden etzlo yayin. Once a guy has a status of a ger toshav, in one of those three opinions, how he becomes a ger toshav, then on a temporary basis, you're allowed to leave him alone in a house with yayin shall yisrael kosher wine. We don't suspect that he is going to come in contact with your wine and prohibit it and make it into yayin esach. But if you're mafkid, that's already a long-term arrangement that you want to give the ger toshav wine on a long-term basis. Then afilu be'ir sheruba Yisrael, even if most of the city is made up of a population that's Jewish, is ein mafkinin etzla. And I guess what the Gemara is saying here, just on a simple level, is that even though he's officially a ger toshav, but he still has lived a life of idol worship, and maybe, if you leave him alone with the wine for a long period of time, he may come to put his hand in the wine. Miyachtim means we're allowed to leave him alone with our wine, even on a long-term basis. And we're not afraid that he's going to make the yayin into yayinness. Even though it's an ir sheruba akum. So we just have to add one point here, that this miyachadim is in contrast to mafkidim, because miyachadim means you invite the guy who's a ger toshav to your house for a short period of time. Brisa goes on. Shamno kiyeno. No, since basically, as we said, he's a bar mina, meaning he's a guy, even though he's a ger toshav, he's still a guy. He hasn't undergone gerus. Therefore, his shemen has the same status as his wine. And this Brisa was written at the time, early period in Jewish history, when the Rabbanim made Zara on shemen akum. Later they repealed it. Frek the Gemara, Shamno ki yeno k'salka daitach shemen mika havi yayin nesach. So what does it mean? What does it mean, yeno? Shamno ki yeno. What does it mean, Shamno ki yeno? Yeno is yayin nesach. They used to pour wine as a libation for their idolatry, but they never took oil as a substitute. It's not like Chamer de Medina. Oil is not a substitute. Ella, not Shamno Kiyeno in the Brisa, but rather change the Brisa and should read Yeno Kishamno. And that means that even when they had the original Gzera of Shemen Akum, was only also B'shtir, you couldn't consume it as food, but you could have benefit from it, you could sell it. And the status of the Yayin of a Ger Toshav is equal to the status of Shemen. It's only Asur B'shtia, but it's Mutar B'Hana. So again, he has the status of a Ger Toshav, in which case will be Mekil on his Yayin. And it's only also B'shtia, not B'Hana. And you have to support him and maintain it. But as far as other dinim is concerned, he is a guy. He's a bar mina. Rav Shimon Omer, Yeno Yayin Nesach. Amrile Mutar B'Shtia. So there are two extreme opinions on what Rav Shimon really said. According to the first opinion, he said that the Yayin of a Ger Toshav, even though he's disclaimed any connection to idolatry, is still awesome. And according to this second Lishna in Rabbi Shimon, Mutar. Again, Mutar means all the way from one extreme to the other. I mean, if you hold Yeno Yain Nesach, that means it's also even B'Hana. And if you hold that Rabbi Shimon meant to say Mutar, it's entirely Mutar, even B'Shtia, not only B'Hana. Ktani Mia, but we see so what is this about? For other things, he is a guy. Lav, shouldn't we assume, against Rav Nachman, that the mevatel avodas kol chacham kol v'kol chacham? Right, we came to the conclusion that one oved kol chavim can be mevatel the idol of another oved kol chavim. And in this sense, even a ger tosha can be mevatel the idol of an idolater because he is bar mina. He's basically a guy. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak lo. I'm not going to accept your opinion as to whether or not a ger toshav could be mevatel. I'm going to maintain, as we saw earlier, that according to Rav Nachman, a ger toshav, since he's not an oved avodah zara befall, he doesn't actually worship idols, so he can't be mevatel avodas kol chavim. The Brisa says that he's like an akum, which sounds like it means he could be mevatel. Litein rishus ulevatel rishus. So this, I think, is what they call eruve chatzeros. Like you want to carry on Shabbos from your house into a chatzer, into a courtyard, you have to make an eruv. Now, in order to make an eruv, you have to get the agreement of all the members, the residents of that chatzer, that they're willing to buy into this eruv. You can't do that if the residents of the eruv are goyim. But let's say at least one of the residents of that chotzer, of that courtyard, is a ger toshav. And that's called l'shar kol davar, meaning he's considered bar mina, he's considered a guy, as far as eruve chatzeros, kirisanya, as we learned in the Brisa, Yisrael, mumar. Did I skip anything? Just 1 second. No. Yisrael Mumar, Mishamer Shabbato B'Shuk. So we're talking about a Mumar, but he's not a full-fledged Mumar. On the outside, remember those guys who used to say, well, we'll eat in a non-kosher restaurant on the outside, but at home we're kosher, or the other way around. Anyway, so on the outside, he observes the Shabbos, but inside he violates the Shabbos. That's the nature of his movements. And what's his status? Mevatel Rishus. He's one of those residents of the courtyard who completely invalidates the Eruv, and he's like a guy, even though he's Israel. Technically, he's Jewish, but he's a Muma, and he violates the Shabbos. Sheina Mishaber Shabbato B'Shuk. Oh, now we have another case. If we have a Jew who violates the Shabbos publicly, I'm sorry, just one second. She'en Mishamer Shabbato. Right, he doesn't even observe the Shabbos publicly. It means he violates the Shabbos publicly. He's Machal Shabbos B'Ra'asya. Is ein mevater. Why is that? It's counterintuitive. And the answer is Mepnei Amru. Chazal said Yisrael nosim rishus mevater rishus. But Yisrael can decide whether he wants to relinquish his rights in the chatzis in favor of setting up the Eruv, or he can be mevater. So he can say, I object, I don't want this Eruv. Ubi oved kochavim ad sheyiskar. But in the case of an idolater, it's not enough that the idolater gives the okay, the green light to the other residents of Jewish residents of the courtyard. He's got to make a kinyan. Sheyiskar. In other words, he signs a shtar schirus with the Jewish residents of that courtyard to give them rights to use his place. So if a Jew publicly desecrates the Shabbos, he's like an idol worshiper. It's counterintuitive. If he wants to give up his rights to the Chotzer, because right now he's Mavatel the Chotzer, the Erev of the Chotzer, then he's got to sign a shtar, like any Ovid Kol Chavit. Ketzad? How does a Jew relinquish his rights in the Chotzer to facilitate the Eruv? Omer Lo, he says to any of his neighbors, Rishusi knuya lecha, Rishusi mevutelis lecha, Kana v'yein tzarich lezakos. So again, you have to learn Eruvin. It's been a long time since we learned Eruvin, but basically, the concept of being mevatel the Eruv in a case of Eruv Chatzeros is not dependent on mammon, on actual technical legal ownership, and therefore ain't tzarich lezakos, but all you need is some sort of declaration that my rishus is batel to you, it's knuya to you. That's sufficient. Okay, then this is where we'll stop. And Mirza Hashem, tomorrow, regular time, no? 9:30, does that sound reasonable?